Oh, yeah. Good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. Does Florida have the toughest SEC schedule in all of 2024? Um, in other words, are they the SEC team with the toughest schedule? We're going to look at it here in just a second in this video. A Florida schedule preview. Try to figure out what's their toughest game, toughest stretch of game, trap games, road games, home games, what's the non-con, all that kind of stuff. But there's already been a lot said about the Florida schedule in 2024, really since they were announced a couple of months ago. And it is an absolutely brutal schedule. No question about it. One thing, though, I want to talk about just when it comes to trying to figure out how tough schedules are in general, there's a couple of different things that happen, I think, when people talk about it. This schedule is hard, this schedule is easy. First thing is, in some instances, it depends on how good the team is you're talking about. In this case, Florida, for example, right? Which I've been very clear on my thoughts on Florida over the last couple of years. I don't think they're very good. I don't think Billy Napier is very good. I don't think he's fit for that job. I don't think he's going to survive past this season. I've been telling you really since 2022 that I think he's getting fired after the 2024 season, and I still feel that way. But anyway, so just as a way of making an example of what I'm trying to talk about here with schedules and how hard they are. So, for example, let's say you took Vanderbilt, right? And you lined them up against any 12 random teams, all right? And we could look at the Vanderbilt schedule, but you look at Vanderbilt's schedule and you say, okay, it's this hard or whatever it is, okay? You could take, let's say, as an example, Ohio State, okay? And give Ohio State the exact same schedule Vandy has. But people won't look at that schedule as having the same difficulty, when in reality it does. In reality, the difficulty of a schedule is the same no matter who's playing against that schedule. But in our minds, when we look at something, we tend to judge the schedule based on how good we think the team playing it is, right? So you could line 12 teams up and say Vandy's got to play these 12 teams. And I'll take it a step further. Let's say Vanderbilt was playing every team in the country, 12 games. They were playing every team in the country that was ranked between 13 and 25 or 14 and 25, whatever the last 12 teams are in the top 25. These teams are ranked 14 through 25. Well, Vandy's going to be an underdog to all those teams. To Vandy, all of those games are difficult, right? Vandy is one of the worst Power 5 programs in the country. So if you line them up and make them play, the 14, the 15, the 16, the 17, all the way through 25, whatever it is for 12 teams, you're going to have a certain idea in your mind about how difficult that schedule is. If I were to take Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Bama, whatever, and line them up against those same 12 teams, in reality, the strength of schedule would be exactly the same for those teams or Vandy. But in our mind, we would look at it as Vandy having a much harder, man, everybody they play is better and all that. So there's no real way to do strength of schedule. It's obviously subjective and opinion-based, right? And strength of schedule changes once the season starts and games start getting played and teams start winning and losing games. But it's just something I've been thinking about, reading through some of the comments on some of the other videos I've done over the last few days about various teams' schedules. You can click back if you want to check those out. I've done 4 or 5 schedule previews over the last few days, and we're going to keep them going for another week or so. But it just got me thinking about the different way people look at strength of schedule. Again, in reality, strength of schedule is based solely on who you're playing. It's got nothing to do with how good or bad that your team actually is. But in our minds, we don't view it that way. We just don't. If a team that we view as a top 5 team is playing a team that's ranked 22nd, in our mind, that's an easy game for the top 5 team. If Vandy is playing a team ranked 22nd, then on our mind it's a difficult game because Vandy's playing it. It is a more difficult game for Vandy, in this example, to play the 22nd ranked team than it would be for a Georgia, Ohio State, whatever, to play the 22nd team. But in terms of just strength of schedule, it's viewed the same. So anyway, just wanted to talk about that at the start of the video. But let's get into the Florida part of the video. Here we go. I agree with people who say Florida has one of, if not the hardest schedules in all of college football for 2024. And I agree with it from both perspectives. If you were to give just anybody this schedule, no matter how good or bad you think they are, it would be a tough schedule. Now, in Florida's case, because, again, in my opinion, they're not going to be very good in 2024, maybe the schedule looks more difficult even than it actually is. But let's just go through it. They open up with a non-con game against Miami. So no warm-up games for Florida. No FCS or Group of Five. In-state Power 5 matchup here between Florida and Miami. And in fact, you'll see this as we go through the schedule. Florida plays all three of the other Power 5 programs in the state of Florida in 2024. They play Miami in week 1. They play Florida State at the end of the year. And they've got Central Florida coming up on this schedule about halfway through as well. So a chance to be a very embarrassing season for Florida in terms of losing to every other Power 5 team in their own state. Now, they may win one or two of them. We'll see. Anyway, they start off with Miami. Both teams, I think, look at this game as a game they have to win. Florida fans look at Miami and they go, Miami is not very good. They haven't been very good. We ought to be able to beat them. Miami fans look at Florida and go, Florida's not very good. Florida hasn't been very good. We ought to be able to beat them. And it seems to me like whoever loses this game between Florida and Miami, there's no saving the season, because I'm going to be honest, I think Miami has a chance to have a better record than Florida because they're in the ACC and their schedule just isn't as tough overall as Florida's is. But I'm not necessarily 100% convinced right now anyway that Miami is a better team than Florida. Now, if I was going to pick this game right now, I'd probably pick Miami to win, but I think this has a chance to be a close competitive game. But if you're Florida and you can't beat Miami, you got a lot more difficult games on your schedule than that. If you're Miami and you can't beat Florida, same thing. It just seems like this is a must-win game. And that's rare for week 1 games, especially moving into an era of a 12-team playoff. There's no such thing as an elimination game in week 1 in terms of playoffs. But it just feels like whichever team isn't good enough to win this game is probably not reaching their goals for 2024. I think this is a huge early season game for both teams. At home again for Florida, they play Samford. This is the lower classification school. So no matter what happens in that week 1 game, you would expect a win there. And then another non-con game against another Power 5 opponent, Texas A&M. Florida's playing 11 Power 5 opponents in 2024. So there's been a lot made over the years about certain teams' schedules and how they schedule or don't schedule big out-of-conference games or Power 5 matchups or whatever. No one will be able to accuse Florida of that this year. Now, when the Central Florida game was scheduled, Central Florida was a Group of 5 team, not a Power 5 team, and they are, of course, now a Power 5 team headed into their second year in the Big 12. But nevertheless, Florida plays 11 Power 5 opponents. That Samford game is their only non-Power 5 opponent. So Texas A&M at home, again, it's sort of a Miami situation from week 1, right? Florida fans have got to be looking at Texas A&M and going, man, they haven't been good in a couple of years, at least. They fired their coach. They lost a ton to the transfer portal. We get them at home. If we can't beat Texas A&M, we're in rough shape. Texas A&M is probably looking at things from a similar perspective. Like Florida, Texas A&M also has a big opponent week 1. Texas A&M hosts Notre Dame. Now, they're probably not going to win that one. So this becomes then their next opportunity to win a game that people would be paying attention to. And they have to be looking at Florida going, Florida's not very good. They haven't been very good. Billy Napier's in over his head. He's probably getting fired. We're a more talented roster top to bottom. We ought to be able to go in there and win. Whichever team loses this game is not a very good look. But interesting game, though. This is an SEC game early in the season for Florida at home. We'll see. Then they go on the road and play Mississippi State. I think this is the first game, at least for me, outside of the Samford game. But this is the first Power 5 game Florida has that I look at and I go, yeah, I'm fairly confident Florida will win that one. Now, not that I think they can't beat Miami or can't beat Texas A&M, but I wouldn't be very confident in it. I'm pretty confident they'll go on the road and beat what I think might be the worst team in the SEC next year, Mississippi State. This will be yet another new coaching staff. So this will be their third coaching staff in 3 years. And Mike Leach 2 years ago, he passed away, promoted Zach Arnett, then fired him after 1 year. This will be their third coaching staff in 3 years. You got to think Florida can go on the road and get that win. Then the first of 2 bye weeks comes, and they get 2 bye weeks. Everybody gets 2 bye weeks this season. It's just the way the calendar falls. It's not a change in the college football rules or anything, but you get your first bye week. Come out of that bye week, you play your last non-conference game of the year. This one against, actually, it's not the last non-conference game, I don't think. Yeah, you play Florida State at the end of the year. Anyway, come out of your bye week and you host Central Florida. So if you're looking for some positive here in the first half of Florida's schedule, if you pick out the toughest games, they're all at home, right? Miami game at home, Texas A&M game at home, the Central Florida game even is at home. I would say the 2 easiest games would be Samford and at Mississippi State. So your one road game here, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So out of your first 5 games, you only go on the road once, and that's at Mississippi State, a winnable game. All your other games are at home. So that's a benefit. And Florida's schedule is backloaded. So not that the front half of this schedule is easy. I mean, again, host Miami, host Texas A&M, host Central Florida. All 3 of those teams could potentially beat Florida. Now, I would be surprised if they lost all 3 of them. I think they'll win some and lose some. But I wouldn't describe this as an easy start to the season for Florida, these 5 games. But then it really gets turned up here after the Central Florida game. And this is where it starts becoming almost impossible to find any wins at all for Florida. Central Florida game at home on October 5th. After that, on the road at Tennessee. I know Florida beat Tennessee last year. That game was in the swamp. Tennessee hasn't won there since BlackBerries were being used as phones. At Tennessee is a whole different animal. I think Tennessee is probably going to be a little bit better than they were last year. Florida, I'm not so sure. Tennessee will be a favorite in this game. It's a tough place to play. Tennessee beat them last time they played in Knoxville. That's going to be a tough game. It would be hard to pick Florida to win that one right now. I think most people look at that game right now and say Tennessee probably wins that one. And you come back home and you get Kentucky, and this is probably the easiest game left on your schedule. And that's saying something considering Kentucky's beat you a couple of years in a row. They've beat you, I think, 3 of the last 5. They've kind of dominated the series over the last 5 or 6 years, Kentucky has. And they're going to be another mid-level SEC team, which is what they've been over the last 3 or 4 years, while they've been busy beating Florida every single year. You get them at home, that's an obvious benefit. I think most people look at this game right now as basically a coin flip. Could Florida win? Yes. Could Kentucky win? Yes. But you start on October 12th with that Tennessee game and you work your way down. To me, this is probably the only game that even comes close to giving Florida a 50% chance of winning this home game at Kentucky. You come out of that, you get your second bye week of the season, and then you start your last month of the season. And I'm here to let you know right now, I don't think there's a team in the country, not a single team in the country, that could win all 5 of these games in a row. Just look at these last 5 games here. Starts off November 2nd, neutral site game against Georgia. Georgia's going to be ranked 1st, 2nd, or 3rd in every preseason ranking on planet Earth. Now, preseason rankings don't mean anything in the end, and that doesn't even tell us what Georgia might be ranked when this game is played on November 2nd. It doesn't even tell us how good or bad Georgia is going to be, but it's a perception of how these teams are going to be heading into next year. This is a tough game for Florida. Florida hasn't won this game since the COVID year in 2020. Kirby's only lost to Florida twice in the 9 years he's been at Georgia. Georgia will be a significant favorite there. Hard to imagine Florida winning that game. Then you got to go on the road and play Texas, another team that's going to be ranked in the top 2 or 3 of every single preseason poll on planet Earth. They return their quarterback, Quinn Ewers. They get their running back back. They return a lot on defense. They got to replace some wide receivers, but they knocked it out of the park in the portal again. They're going to be an absolutely loaded team. They made the playoffs last year, winning the Big 12. This is their first year in the SEC. So we'll see if they trip up on some landmines here and there. But again, on the road at Texas, this is a situation where right now anyway, 90 out of 100 college football fans are going to be picking Texas to win this game, and they're going to be a significant favorite. After that, you come back home and you play LSU, a team you've been playing every year for a long time in the SEC and that has absolutely owned and dominated you over the last 10 years. LSU was something like 8-2 or 7-3 against Florida in the last 10 seasons. It's been 4 or 5 years since Florida has beat them. LSU's a more talented team. I think LSU's got a much better coaching staff. You get them at home. Again, that is an advantage and a benefit, but you're talking about another team that's going to be ranked maybe in the top 10 when this game is played. They're in the top 15 of any preseason rankings you want to look at. You're a likely underdog there and likely to lose that one too. Now, you get to stay at home the following week, but it doesn't get any easier. Ole Miss, a team that's ranked in the top 10 of every single preseason ranking, right? Had their best season in school history last year, winning 11 games, winning a New Year's Six game. They blew out Penn State. A ton coming back. Another team that destroys it in the portal every single year. Lane Kiffin, look, I've had to admit I've been wrong on Lane Kiffin. He's proving me more and more wrong, it seems like, with every year that goes by. You get them at home, but they're going to be a significant favorite over you. And then you finish up on the road at Florida State. Now, I don't think Florida State's going to be as good as they were last year, but they're going to be better than Florida, I think. Again, you play them there. They're a significant favorite. They're going to be ranked much higher than you in the preseason. And so, in other words, that's, people's perception of Florida State is much higher right now than it is of Florida. But you just look at these last 5 games. Georgia, a top 5 team. Texas, a top 5 team. LSU, top 15. Ole Miss, top 10. And Florida State, likely in the top 15 or top 20. I don't think there's a team in the country that can win all of those games in a row. I don't. I don't think Ohio State can win all 5 of those in a row. I don't think Alabama could win all 5 of those in a row. Michigan, Oregon, whatever, any team you want to name. I don't think there's a team on the planet that can win all 5 of those in a row. But we may find out that Florida can't win any of them. And if that's the case, Billy Napier will not make it to that Florida State game. In fact, there's a strong possibility he gets fired in the bye week before the Georgia game, in my opinion. A lot of times when teams decide to make changes, they do it during a bye week. That gives the interim coaching staff sort of an extra week to work with the team, right? If things have gone bad in the first half of this schedule, let's say they lose to Miami and Texas A&M, right? They beat Samford and Mississippi State. So let's say they're at 2-2 heading into the first bye week. And then they lose to Central Florida and they're 2-3. Lose to Tennessee, 2-4. Even if they beat Kentucky, they're sitting at 3-4. And then they have this coming up. This could be where they make the move with Billy Napier. If not, maybe it's after the Georgia or the Texas game, but I do not think Billy Napier will survive the month of November. I don't think the calendar will hit December 1st with Billy Napier as the head coach of Florida. This is an absolutely brutal end to the schedule. This looks an awful lot like a 3, 4, 5 win season for Florida. This would be their 4th losing season in a row if that were the case. And it would be the 3rd losing season in a row for Billy Napier. Dan Mullen had a losing season his last year in Gainesville. Sunbelt Billy Napier has had a losing record every single year he's been there, 2 years. A total of 3 losing seasons in a row so far. This would make the 4th losing season in a row for Florida, the 3rd straight for Billy Napier. I just don't know how a program like Florida keeps a coach who has a losing record 100% of the time after 3 seasons. It feels like this is going to be the swan song for Billy Napier to me. But anyway, what do y'all think about this schedule? Have you seen a schedule that you think is more difficult than this one? Let me know. Put it in the comments down below. I may do a video on it. I'll at least take a look at it and see if I think you're right or not. But this is an absolutely brutal schedule. Again, regardless of how you want to look at it. If you want to look at it as, again, in my mind, strength of schedule shouldn't change based on who's playing against it. However hard you think this schedule is, it's that hard no matter who's playing against it. Now, this is obviously a harder schedule to Florida, an unranked team, than it would be to Oregon, a top 5 team. But the strength of schedule rating of this schedule should be the same from team to team. But anyway, let me know if you think there's a team out there with a more difficult schedule. I'd love to take a look at it. And if you're a Florida fan and you disagree with me, you think I'm wrong, you think Florida's somehow going to win 7 or 8 games and Billy Napier's going to save his job, feel free to let me know that too. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Have a good morning.